in order to verify whether the girl had really become a vegetable. The murderer even took a syringe and repeatedly stabbed her in the thigh, and only let out a sigh of relief when he found that the girl did not move at all and did not respond. Not long ago, at a party at a Chabel's house, the girl, who was a waitress, accidentally fell into the pool when she went to get a drink. She climbed out and wrung the water off her body in front of the glass, but never imagined that there were eyes peering at her intently behind the glass. The girl's good looks and perfect figure made the Chabel's son's heart flutter and his imagination run wild. After the party ended, as she was cleaning the room, Heman came over. The girl was about to leave, but Heman stopped her and offered her a drink. Heman tried to assault her. In a panic, the girl grabbed a bottle nearby and smashed it hard on his head. The girl ran away in panic and ran head-on into a bespectacled man. She begged the other man to help her. Unexpectedly, Jack was friends with the Chabel's son. Not only did he not save her, but he threw her to the ground. The girl was now full of fear and helplessness. But what could she do in the face of two men? She could only fight desperately, hoping for a miracle. At this moment, she wished someone would help her. Meanwhile, the girl's father, a little worried, came to the wealthy family's suburban villa to pick her up. The father called out his daughter's name and looked around. Suddenly, he heard his daughter's screams from upstairs. Realizing something was wrong, he immediately ran upstairs and encountered the man in glasses watching at the door. The girl's father saw that the man looked panicked and knew something was wrong. He rushed over to save his daughter. The man with glasses stopped him. The two men struggled with each other, but the girl's father was no match for the young man. In the end, Jack pushed him down the stairs. Seeing this, Jack didn't know what to do. He ran up to check on the situation, but he discovered that the girl's father was no longer breathing. At that moment, the Chabel's son had not given up. He had no idea what was going on downstairs. He pushed the girl onto the bed. Then he tore off her clothes like crazy. No matter how the girl screamed, it was useless. She fought back and kicked Heman away. Then she ran to a balcony. Seeing that Heman was about to break in, the girl climbed directly outside the balcony fence. Heman persuaded her not to do anything stupid. In an instant, the pure white snow was dyed red. Heman was completely shocked. He stumbled downstairs. He wanted to seek help from Jack, but found that there was still a person lying downstairs. The two of them hid in a corner, terrified and shivering. Heman told Jack that there was someone else outside. He ran out of the room. He went to the unconscious girl. Jack followed him out. They couldn't believe that two people had died all of a sudden. After a bit of blaming, Jack came to his senses first. This was about to end their lives. Jack suggested getting the bodies up and leaving without being discovered. So the two of them decided to fake a car accident between a father and daughter to avoid blame. Just as they were about to move the body into the car, the younger sister and the driver happened to return. Driver Wu saw that the two were covered in blood and asked what had happened. Seeing that they could not hide it, Heman confessed that he had killed someone. He begged Driver Wu to keep their secret. Annie suddenly returned to take the diamond necklace. Just as she was about to leave, her brother snatched the diamond necklace away from her. Seeing that Heman was covered in blood, Annie asked what had happened. Her brother told her not to ask any questions and to leave quickly. Then Heman put the diamond necklace around the girl's neck. Suddenly, he realized that the girl was still breathing, but they had already come to this point. The two of them chose to go with the flow. They went to a cliff and put the father and daughter in the front row. Then they pushed the car down in one go. An originally happy family was thus shattered. Watching the car roll off the cliff, the two of them felt relieved and revealed a smile of success. At this moment, the girl's mother was still waiting for the father and daughter to come home. Anxious, she came to look for them. She found that the party had long since ended and no one was there. Just as she was about to go back, she saw Heman and Jack come back in a taxi. At first, her mother didn't think much of it and didn't know that their deaths were related to the two of them. The two returned to the villa and cleaned up the scene. They also burned all the clothes with bloodstains. Jack suggested that Heman's sister help them. Then he called and asked Annie to go to the police and said that her diamond necklace had been stolen. Heman just wanted to fake it as if the girl had stolen the necklace and jumped off the balcony after being discovered. The girl's name is Huizu. Although her family is poor, her parents love her very much, and she has a boyfriend she has been dating for many years. Huizu has always dreamed of becoming an actress and has successfully won the audition. However, this has aroused the jealousy of the daughter of a wealthy family, and she has long coveted Huizu's boyfriend. Seeing someone else's dream come true, Annie feels very uncomfortable, so she looks for every opportunity to humiliate Huizu, and even deliberately embarrasses her at parties. Huizu has found out that she is pregnant, but before she could share the joy with her boyfriend, she was assaulted by Heman. Learning that her brother and Jack had killed someone shocked Annie. After Heman's desperate pleas, she finally agreed to help cover it up. After all, she and Huizu had a grudge in the selection race. Huizu's death also relieved Annie a lot. The two of them naively thought they had done everything perfectly. Huizu adjusted the time on the car and pretended to fall asleep waiting for her girlfriend to arrive. She deliberately asked what time it was. Her girlfriend glanced at the time on the car and told him. Jack then separated from Heeman and went to a bar to party all night. The reason they did this was to create an alibi. The next day the police arrived at the scene and sent the father and daughter to the hospital for rescue. Huizu's mother learned that her daughter and husband were killed and completely collapsed. Fortunately, Huizu still had a chance of survival, but the situation was not optimistic. Even if she survived, she might become a vegetable. Her boyfriend also quickly arrived. Seeing Huizu, who was seriously injured and unconscious, he found it hard to accept the reality. Officer Park, in charge of the case, has extensive experience and is quite experienced in handling such homicide cases. Based on the footprints left at the scene and the fake car accident scene, the origin of a button inside was also found. In addition, there were traces of the murderer's blood and fingerprints on Huizu's body. As expected, Heeman was the first to be arrested. However, when Officer Park questioned him, he refused to admit his guilt. His famous girlfriend came to be an alibi witness. Officer Park asked her what time it was. The girlfriend said it was the time she saw in the car. Annie was also summoned to the police station and reported the theft of the diamond necklace as her brother had instructed her to do. Officer Park felt that there were too many suspicious points in the case to close it like this. But that night, the fathers of both sides met with him. One was the son of a chaebol, the other the son of a member of parliament, and under the coercion and bribery of the two, Officer Park had no choice but to compromise, and Heeman was released the next day, and the case was classified as a hit-and-run accident. This incident caused a huge uproar and also attracted the attention of a man named Paul. Huizu's mother stormed into the police station. She did not accept the verdict, because she had seen Heeman and Jack return to the villa that night. The deaths of the father and daughter were definitely related to the two men. However, the mother was weak and was dragged out. That night, she went directly to the chaebol chairman to demand an explanation. The two were struggling when the scene was witnessed by the chaebol wife, who had just returned home. She overheard their secret conversation. It turned out that Huizu's mother had been molested by the chairman of the chaebol. This made the chaebol wife very angry. She thought that Huizu's mother must have deliberately approached her husband. For this reason, the wife offered a large sum of money to Driver Wu to get rid of Huizu and her daughter. Driver Wu patted his chest and promised to complete the task. Just after Huizu's mother parted from the chaebol chairman, a speeding car hit her and sent her flying. Driver Wu didn't drive away until she stopped twitching. Huizu's boyfriend was hit again. In just a few days, such a change has happened to a happy family. This makes Danny heartbroken. However, this is not the end. Driver Wu was assigned by the wife of the chaebol. While no one was around, he planned to do it again to Huizu, and this pervert saw that Huizu was quite attractive. Not only did he boldly kiss her, but he also lewdly put his hand under the quilt. Huizu, who had lost consciousness, had no ability to resist and could only let him do whatever he wanted. Now that Huizu is no longer a threat, Driver Wu is even more unrestrained. The driver directly told how the young master of the chaebol family and his best friend faked the father and daughter's car accident to get away with it, and her mother was also killed by her own hit and run. Under the huge shock, Huizu's hand moved, just as Driver Wu was about to strangle her. Thankfully, the nurse on rounds came in and stopped him from committing evil deeds. Driver Wu quickly got up and lied that he was a distant relative of Huizu's, and the nurse urged him to leave. And all of this Huizu had firmly etched in her heart. And then Driver Wu came to report the situation and informed the chairman of the Zaibatsuan senator by that Huizu was no longer a threat and would not live for much longer anyway, so there was no need to take action against him. And when he heard this, not only the chairman of the Zaibatsuan senator by but also Officer Park let out a sigh of relief. And then Heeman received a call from his father, informing him that the matter was over and there was nothing to worry about. This made the mother and son extremely happy. Since the Huizu family's accident, Danny, his boyfriend, has not been able to get over the pain. He thinks about the bits and pieces of the past with Huizu and it is unbearable. He spends the whole day in tears and drowns his sorrows in alcohol. This gives Annie the opportunity she's been waiting for. She takes advantage of Danny's dazed state and secretly adds something to his glass. The next day, Danny wakes up completely dazed. Just as he's about to leave, he's stopped by Annie. Facing Annie's accusations, he felt even more sorry for Huizu, who was still fighting against death. However, Danny did not know that he had fallen into Annie's trap. Annie did not want Danny to take responsibility, but she wanted him to think carefully. How long was he going to take care of a paralyzed vegetable in bed? Was it really worth ruining his life? These words made Danny waver a little. That night, he went to Huizu's ward. Although he felt guilty, he still proposed to break up and told her that he was going to marry Annie. Danny also hated himself for what he had done, but he just didn't have the confidence or courage to protect Huizu forever. The sense of helplessness and reluctance broke his heart. Lying in bed, Huizu also shed tears of sadness. However, Huizu, who had no parents, was greeted by a caring nurse that day. Under her careful care, a year passed in the blink of an eye. That day, The nurse was surprised to find that Huizu wanted to sit up. However, she was still a little weak after just recovering. The caregiver was so excited that she turned around to call the doctor. But Huizu stopped her. She must never reveal that she had woken up. Otherwise, she might be killed again. Later, Paul, a relative of the caregiver, arrived at the hospital room. The first thing Huizu asked after waking up was where her child was. Although she could not move and was already fully conscious, she knew that her child had gradually grown and was born. However, Paul told her that the child had died shortly after birth. The last glimmer of hope was extinguished. Huizu was heartbroken, but she had no time to grieve. All the misfortune was caused by the Chable family, and the flame of revenge gradually sprouted at this moment. And Paul's father was also killed by the Chable family. The reason why he took care of Huizu was also to get some evidence of the Chable family's crimes in her hands. Back then, Paul's father and the Chable chairman built a business empire together. Due to financial problems, Paul's father was investigated, but soon after, his father's body was found in the river. The police closed the case as suicide due to guilt. Before his father was killed, he handed over some company documents to his aunt. Through these materials, clues were discovered. There were many suspicious points. Paul was determined to find out the truth and defend the abyss. Huizu was extremely grateful to Paul's aunt for taking care of her. She also told the two of her unbearable experiences, and she was also violated while in a vegetative state. Thinking of these painful memories, Huizu is now in tears. Paul and his aunt were deeply grieved when they learned about it. The two of them share a similar deep hatred, so they will join forces to fight the Chable family. Now the news that Huizu has woken up cannot be leaked. Otherwise she will inevitably be persecuted by the Chable family, so she must be moved as soon as possible. However, that night, Driver Wu came again. Huizu, who had already regained consciousness, in order not to be exposed, faced Driver Wu's lewd behavior, and she could only suppress the anger in her heart. Just at this critical moment, fortunately, Auntie Paul returned in time. Auntie saw what had just happened and warned that if they did not leave quickly, she would call the police. After driving Wu out, Huizu told him that he was the murderer of her mother, and that he had also sexually assaulted her many times. Paul realized that those people would not be able to rest in peace as long as Huizu was alive. He had to transfer Huizu out of the hospital as soon as possible, or that man would definitely come again. So he and his aunt started their operation that night. Sure enough, Wu came again. When he realized that Huizu was gone, he panicked. He immediately notified Heeman of the matter. Officer Park also received the call shortly after. He used his position to set up a roadblock, and eventually stopped Paul's car. My aunt lied and said that she was sending Huizu to a distant relative's house to fend for herself. Officer Park did not stop her and let them pass. Huizu looked at her former home from afar. Everything was different now. The good old days were gone. She turned her grief into strength and determined to make those animals pay for their crimes with their blood. The next day, with Officer Park's help, Huizu was found. It turned out that she had been sent to live with distant relatives. It was said that an elderly couple had taken Huizu in. Since there was no hope of recovery, it would only cost medical expenses, so the elderly couple decided to take care of her until she died. In the blink of an eye, Officer Park told the chairman of the conglomerate and Senator Bai about this. The two men, who had been relieved, let their guard down, but Heeman and Jack didn't think so. They believed that as long as Huizu was alive, she would be a scourge, so the two of them decided to take action that night to completely eliminate her. Driver Wu was ordered to come and investigate, and was discovered by Paul. He had already arranged everything for Huizu. He just wanted Huizu to disappear forever. That night, Heeman and Jack rushed to Huizu's village. Paul, on the other hand, gave the two elderly people a large sum of money to get rid of them. They then got a corpse from somewhere, and proceeded to fill the house with kerosene and set it on fire. At this moment, Huizu's flames of revenge were also ignited. She took off the ring her boyfriend had given her and threw it into the fire. Huizu no longer existed. The raging fire soon attracted a crowd of villagers. When Heeman and his party arrived, they learned from the old man that Huizu was still inside. They secretly rejoiced. The fire had come just in time. They could rest easy without having to do anything themselves. However, not far away, Huizu had been watching them the whole time. At Huizu's funeral, Danny wept uncontrollably. Her classmate gave her the ring she had found at the scene of the fire. Annie couldn't accept that her husband was still thinking about her, but no matter what she did, she couldn't take it away. Annie, furious, turned and left. Looking at the ring in her hand, Danny couldn't help but tremble. She blamed herself. If she hadn't been unable to hold on, Huizu wouldn't have suffered this fate. He sat down on the steps and wept loudly, and all of this was seen by Huizu. But she knew in her heart that if she wanted revenge, she had to forget everything that had happened. Huizu promised her parents that she would take revenge. She would make those who had hurt them and herself experience something even more painful. Now she wanted to confront the Chables and Senator Bai. It was clear that they were far less powerful than they had led her to believe. With Paul's help, Huizu was going to study abroad, so she left, full of anger. Before she left, Huizu swore that when she returned, it would be the end of those people. 7 years passed in the blink of an eye. Paul also successfully entered the conglomerate of the wealthy family and became their secretary. Heman came to pick up Huizu from the airport after she returned from studying abroad. Just then, Huizu appeared. She had changed her name and returned in all her glory. She wanted to make those people who had hurt her parents and herself pay a painful price. Heman looked at this familiar back and couldn't help but feel a little flustered. He never would have imagined that Huizu had survived that year. This time, she was back for revenge. Just as Heman was wondering, his girlfriend Lucy's appearance interrupted his thoughts. Huizu came to visit her parents first to tell them that she was back. Then she began to keep track of her enemies' every move. She also looked forward to the expression on their faces when they saw her. Over the past 7 years, Paul had gained the trust of President Zhang. Senator Bai had Paul's classmates keeping an eye on him. Auntie had worked at the bar where President Zhang often went for 4 years. Jack also had people working for him that Paul had put there. Even the nanny at President Zhang's house was sent in 5 years ago. These people all had grudges against them to one degree or another. Now that everything is ready, they are just waiting for the right opportunity. Huizu will begin her plan of revenge. First, she needs to convince those people that she is someone else. That night, Heman brought Lucy to the bar. His aunt told Huizu about it. Without any hesitation, Huizu looked away. Heman accidentally made eye contact with her. The piercing gaze and familiar face made his smile freeze instantly. Huizu saw that she had achieved her goal and turned to leave. Heman immediately chased after her and asked his aunt who the woman was. And his aunt told him that she was Jenny, the daughter of a wealthy family who had just returned to the country. Heman couldn't believe that there was someone in the world who looked so similar to her. He immediately asked Officer Park to find out Jenny's identity. The information showed that Jenny was adopted abroad when she was 2 years old. She graduated from a prestigious school and was the goddaughter of a hotel tycoon. There was evidence to show that this woman named Jenny could not be Huizu, but this information still did not dispel Heman's concerns, and all of this was under Huizu's control. Next, she found President Hyun, who was Heman's girlfriend's mother. Because Huizu had helped President Hyun abroad and knew that she would be in the country for a while, President Hyun warmly invited her to stay at his home. That night, Huizu went to President Hyun's house. When Lucy saw her, she instantly remembered the long-dead Huizu. If her mother hadn't introduced her as someone who grew up abroad, she would never have believed that they weren't the same person. Huizu deliberately approached President Hyun in order to get into the Chaebol site. Sure enough, the next day she introduced Huizu to President Zhang. When President Zhang saw Huizu, he was also shocked. He pretended to be carefree and deliberately asked about Huizu's background. But her temperament and conversation had already changed. Huizu, who was also an actress, could not afford to show the slightest flaw. With President Hyun's introduction, President Zhang quickly dispelled his suspicions. It seems that Huizu's background abroad is extraordinary. After returning home, President Zhang also reminded his son not to miss this woman. This is also good for his family's company to quickly enter the foreign market. Under Heman's arrangement, Officer Park followed Huizu to confirm her identity once again. However, Huizu had already sensed it. Even though Officer Park called out her name behind her back, she did not react in any way. Facing the police officer who had sheltered the Chaebol family back then, Huizu was calm and unruffled. The hatred inside her had made her hone her skills for 7 years. This test was nothing. That night, Officer Park came to report. Apart from their resemblance, the two did not match in any other way. Hearing this, Heman finally let down her guard. For Huizu, her ex-boyfriend had always been an unopenable wound. She couldn't help but steal a glance at Danny. At the moment, he was accompanying his daughter to the supermarket. This reminded Huizu of her child, who had died at birth. The hatred in her heart deepened once again. If it weren't for Danny's abandonment, how could her child have left this world? Now there are two options in front of him. Obviously, it is impossible to let go of everything. The only thing left is to completely destroy this man. Revenge is dirty and comes at a price. But Huizu is ready, because those people don't deserve to be forgiven. The revenge plan is progressing step by step. In order to get close to their enemies, Huizu needs to understand each person's habits. From Lucy, she learns that the few have a weekend appointment to go horse riding. Facing the invitation, Huizu naturally wouldn't let go of this opportunity. She then asked Paul to stop Lucy from appearing at the horse farm on weekends. That way, she could create an opportunity to spend time alone with Heman. Sure enough, that day, Lucy had an urgent matter and couldn't go. Someone set off a fire alarm at the company as a prank. She specifically told Heman to take care of her friends. Before she finished speaking, Huizu appeared. She deliberately asked which one was Lucy's boyfriend. The moment Heman saw her, his eyes lit up. He was instantly attracted to Huizu's appearance and temperament. The fact that she looked similar to the person who had assaulted him years ago had long been forgotten. After all, the woman's identity had already been ascertained. At the moment, Heman's mind was full of thoughts about how to win her over. Facing Huizu's small, friendly hand, Heman shook it generously. Without knowing it, he had already fallen into a trap. Huizu's goal was to make him fall in love with her, and then use that love to make him pay a price that would be worse than death. The charm of the mature woman captivated Heeman deeply. At that moment, he had already forgotten his girlfriend Lucy. While Heeman was answering the phone, Huizu ran ahead alone. When Heeman caught up to her, she collapsed to the ground and pretended to have twisted her ankle. Heeman felt so much pain for her that he felt he had seized the opportunity. He carried Huizu on his back. After Heeman returned, he even massaged Huizu tenderly. Looking at Huizu's charming appearance, Heeman couldn't wait to embrace her in his arms and love her. Although Huizu felt extremely disgusted, she had to endure it all and greet him with a smile in order to carry out her revenge plan. After dinner, Lucy rushed over. When she learned that Huizu had twisted her ankle, she accused Heeman of being careless. Huizu's eyes conveyed a meaningful message. After thanking her, she was helped away by her assistant. Once she was out of sight, Huizu stopped pretending and left in a dignified manner. Heeman was looking forward to seeing Huizu again. However, the guilty conscience from what he had done made him paranoid, so he wanted Jack to confirm it as well. The next day, Huizu was invited to the company. The moment she saw Jack, she instantly remembered the painful memories. On the surface, Huizu didn't show any emotions, but inside, her heart was already in turmoil. She tried her best to restrain herself from having dinner with her enemy. The strong Huizu inside didn't reveal a single flaw under Jack's repeated tests. This also dispelled Jack's suspicions. After sending Huizu away, he called Heeman and said that the woman in front of him was not the same person as Huizu. He also persuaded Heeman not to rack his brains over a little guilt. Now Heeman had no worries, but Annie didn't accept it so easily. Through Lucy, Huizu met her. The two had participated in an actor competition together. They knew each other quite well. Although the person in front of her looked nothing like Huizu, she also had the experience of being adopted abroad as a child. However, she never believed that there would be such an exact double in the world. Annie outwardly accepts her, but is determined to uncover Huizu's true identity. Huizu is well aware of this. At present, everyone has more or less accepted her new identity. Huizu will now carry out her revenge one by one. The first person she will deal with is Driver Wu. Paul's ultimate goal is to send him to prison, but Huizu feels that she has given him too easy a deal. The pain that has been branded in her heart cannot be erased, and the hatred for the person who killed her mother will make Huizu feel like suffocating every time she thinks about it. She will make Driver Wu pay the same price. He gradually perished in fear, understanding that the other party was a compulsive gambler. Huizu set a trap. Driver Wu, who had no money, would definitely embezzle public funds as stakes. In that case, President Jiang would never let him go, and Driver Wu had a handle on the plutocrat. He definitely would not let it go. Under Huizu's manipulation, Driver Wu lost miserably after being mercilessly beaten by his creditors. The creditor warned him that if he didn't pay back the money within 3 days, he would make him disappear from this world. Driver Wu had no way out and had to seek help. He threatened the wife of the plutocrat that if she didn't pay back his gambling debt, he would tell everything. Although the wife of the plutocrat was extremely angry, she had no choice because Driver Wu had the evidence, so she could only hide it from the chairman and obediently pay the money. Over the years, she had already given Driver Wu a lot of money. The wife said that there would be no next time. Huizu put Driver Wu's matter aside for the time being. The next day, Huizu put on some beautiful makeup and came to Heeman of her own accord to confuse him. She suggested that the two of them find a quiet place to talk. Heeman was immediately overwhelmed with excitement. He thought of the suburban villa, and then he brought Huizu here. 7 years later, he came to this place full of pain once again. Huizu remembered the unbearable past and could not calm down for a long time. She concealed her hatred and deliberately confused Heeman. Heeman took advantage of the alcohol and sat next to her, praising Huizu as impeccable and perfect. Huizu reciprocated. The mood was right, and Heeman gradually drew closer. But Huizu knew exactly what she was doing, and she wanted to make him anxious. So, unbeknownst to Heeman, she secretly put something in his drink. Before long, Heeman fell asleep on the sofa. Huizu walked through the empty villa. She could almost feel the scene of her father's murder. This was where the tragedy began. Huizu would also begin her revenge here. One day, she would destroy everything those people had. Heeman mistakenly thought that he had drunk too much, and called Huizu that night to apologize, and invited her to have dinner together at the company the next day. However, Huizu invited Jack to lunch before coming. Heeman, who was deeply involved, couldn't wait to embrace Huizu after seeing her. Huizu pushed him away on the grounds that he had a girlfriend, and that the two of them shouldn't be doing this since they were also friends with Lucy. For this Chabel's son, no woman had ever refused him. Heeman, on the other hand, wants Huizu even more. When he learns that Huizu is going to dinner with Jack, he is really upset. Just as he is leaving, he bumps into the Driver Wu. Huizu pretends to be oblivious, but Driver Wu is dumbfounded. Before, he had only seen a photo and thought it looked like her. Now that he sees her in person, Driver Wu is certain that she is either Jenny or Huizu. While Huizu is having dinner with Jack, Driver Wu is secretly observing. Unexpectedly, Annie rushed over angrily. It turned out that she had also made a date with Jack for dinner. Jack, however, had rejected her because of Huizu. Huizu gave her no quarter. It was only natural for her to go out with Jack. But Annie, a married woman, was likely to cause unnecessary misunderstandings. These words left Annie speechless and she had to slink away. In the evening, Heeman met Huizu again. At that time, Jack called and learned that he was with Huizu. Jack was also very upset. He pretended to be concerned and asked Heeman not to betray Lucy. Heeman didn't care about this at all. Huizu deliberately spilled wine on her clothes. Heeman quickly helped her go to the bathroom to clean it up. Driver Wu also saw all this. Lucy happened to call. When her aunt answered the phone, she deliberately told the two that they were dating at the bar. Lucy was furious after hearing this and hurried over. Then her aunt took advantage of the fact that Driver Wu wasn't paying attention and added something to his drink. When Lucy arrived, she saw the two of them getting intimate. She picked up a glass of ice and poured it over Heeman's head. Huizu saw what happened and tried to explain. Lucy, in a rage, started to fight. She treated Huizu like a close friend. She never imagined that she was actually like this. Heeman saw his beloved woman being beaten and directly pulled his girlfriend out. Although Huizu felt sorry for Lucy, she had no choice but to be ruthless. But this was not a bad thing for Lucy. Even if she stayed with Heeman, she would not be happy. Not long after the two left, the Driver Wu staggered in. In a daze, he pointed at Huizu. Huizu did not hide the dirty things she had done to him. In Huizu's curses, the Driver Wu fell to the ground and could not get up. The next day, when he woke up, he was already at the company. Meanwhile, Heeman received an anonymous phone call about how Driver Wu had blackmailed his mother for gambling debts. Heeman was furious and immediately summoned him to his office, where he proceeded to beat him up. As Driver Wu was being dragged out, he happened to run into Huizu, who stopped him and asked if they had met somewhere before. The sensible Jin Siji didn't dare admit that they had met before, because he wanted to live a few more days, but his good days were about to come to an end. Later, Huizu went to Heeman's office and deliberately asked him how he felt about her, but due to his engagement to his girlfriend, Heeman was in a dilemma. Huizu used this as an excuse to go on a date with the single Jack, which made Heeman very angry. He was jealous and smashed things around. Then Huizu contacted Jack and the two made plans to have dinner together that night. Immediately afterwards, Heeman called, facing his invitation. Jack simply refused. Because of a woman, the two best friends became jealous of each other. The party that lost out naturally felt unbalanced. Since Huizu's appearance, Jack has not even been interested in Annie, who he has always had a crush on. He even told her to stop playing with him. After all, she is already married. Annie found it hard to accept this sudden change. Heeman became more and more angry as he thought about it. He directly left an important meeting and ran to stop Huizu from dating Jack. Huizu never expected to meet her ex-boyfriend here. He excitedly recognized her. Before Huizu could say anything, Heeman hurriedly explained that she was Jenny, who had just returned to the country. After introducing each other, the two left. But how could Danny not know that it was Huizu? Learning that Heeman had ruined her date with Jack made him very angry. Heeman bossily took Huizu to the beach. He was determined to go out with Huizu, and this undoubtedly hurt Lucy. But Huizu did not feel guilty. She wanted Lucy to understand what kind of person Heeman was. But Lucy did not understand this and would not listen. Huizu, who had no choice, had to choose to move out. Before leaving, she thanked President Hyun for his care. Huizu felt sorry for involving this innocent family. President Hyun knew her daughter's character. She also hoped that Huizu would not hurt her daughter. That night, Heeman found Jack and confessed that he had fallen in love with Jenny. The two men thus formally declared war. Paul was worried about Huizu's plan. He was afraid that Huizu would really get caught up in the whirlpool of emotions and it would be difficult to get out of it. But how could Huizu fall in love with a man with whom she had a blood feud? She spent countless nights crying over her parents' photos. It was all thanks to that man. She lived only to take revenge. Nothing would change that purpose. Paul felt ashamed of his misunderstanding of her. He could only apologize repeatedly to the sad Huizu. After moving out of President Hyun's house, Huizu moved into Paul's house. His family was kind and affable, and it also gave Huizu a sense of warmth on her path to revenge. The next day, Danny came looking for her. No one knows Huizu better than he does. Although Huizu denied it over and over again, Danny already had an answer in her heart. Huizu reached out and introduced herself with a new identity. When she saw that Danny was still wearing the ring she had given to him, she tried hard to hide her grief. Unexpectedly, the entire conversation was overheard by Driver Wu. Danny had no face to linger and turned and left. Back then, he abandoned Huizu on the hospital bed. He has never forgiven himself. Even though Huizu was heartbroken, she would not be moved by it again. Driver Wu heard the conversation between the two and could not help but doubt Huizu's identity. That night, Huizu attended a party, but this party almost made her unable to hold back. Apart from President Hyun and Lucy, Everyone else there had an unshakable grudge against her, just as Huizu was in a difficult situation. Luckily, her aunt's son called and asked her to hurry back for dinner. He said that her grandmother had made a lot of delicious food. Huizu took this as an excuse to leave. Heman mistakenly thought that his parents were talking about her marriage to Lucy, which made Huizu unhappy. He wanted to chase after her, but was stopped by Lucy, who warned him that if he went out, it would be the end between them. However, Heman didn't care. At that moment, all he could think about was Huizu. Even though his parents stopped him, he still insisted on chasing after her. Heman pulled Huizu back, hoping that she would understand what it meant for him to chase after her. But Huizu said that she would never attend such social engagements again. Hearing this, Heman hugged her, and Huizu wanted to push him away. Paul, who was waiting nearby, wanted to go out, but after some thought, he held back. At that moment, Lucy walked over. Huizu took the opportunity to push Heman away and turn around and leave. Heman wanted to go after her but was stopped. Huizu was really afraid that she would lose control and let her lose her temper. Paul understood how much pain she was suffering. He never expected today to be like this. Fortunately, the consideration of Paul's family eased Huizu's emotions a lot. Heman told his father that he had fallen for Jenny. President Jiang hoped that he would restrain himself for the greater good. A man who is caught up in a relationship and lacks resolve. How can the company trust him with its future? President Jiang did not give a clear answer, but he asked Paul to keep an eye on the two of them, report back to him if anything goes wrong. He must not let Heman affect the development of the company, and Paul quickly told Heman about this. Heman was puzzled as to why his father's right-hand man would reveal this about him. Paul said, "Because you are the heir to the company," which instantly dispelled Heman's concerns, and so Paul successfully gained Heman's trust. Heman didn't want to lose his inheritance and didn't want to give up Huizu, so he proposed that the two of them date in secret, which was all part of Huizu's plan. She agreed, but only if there was a place they could meet regularly. Heman once again thought of the villa in the suburbs, so he called the caretaker and told him that Huizu was coming and not to stop her, and instructed him not to tell his father, which was exactly what Huizu wanted. And driver Wu, in order to verify Huizu's identity, came back to die. He deliberately mentioned his lewd behavior to anger Huizu, but Huizu was already prepared to make driver Wu unable to see the sun tomorrow. Then the two went to the rooftop. Huizu revealed her identity without any reservations, and driver Wu offered 500 million won, as long as she kept her identity a secret. Huizu readily agreed and let him go to the Chabel's suburban villa tomorrow to get the money. The murderer who killed her mother and violated her is right in front of her eyes. Huizu can't wait to take his life, but Paul stopped her. He also wants to avenge his father's death. Investigating the cause of his father's death will soon bear fruit. Huizu is being too hasty and may ruin everything. But tomorrow is the anniversary of her mother's death. If she waits any longer, Huizu is afraid she won't be able to hold on. She must get rid of driver Wu so her mother can rest in peace. Paul understands Huizu's pain and tacitly approves. The next day, Huizu waited early for driver Wu to come gleefully to collect the money, without knowing what punishment awaited him. When he saw the money, driver Wu's eyes lit up and he couldn't wait to take it. But Huizu had one more condition, which was to make him tell everything that happened here 7 years ago. This was no secret to Huizu. In order to get the money and leave as soon as possible, driver Wu said everything without any defense. He described the whole incident in vivid detail, which made Huizu remember the painful experience again. All these crimes were suppressed by Officer Park. At the same time, Huizu also learned that his mother's death was ordered by the wife of the Chabel. Even Annie helped her brother commit perjury. When Huizu asked what he had done in the hospital room, driver Wu then realized that Huizu knew everything. She just pretended to be a vegetable and fooled everyone. Her aunt, who was waiting outside, saw that Heman had arrived at the villa, and immediately sent a message to Huizu. Huizu deliberately provoked driver Wu and slapped him hard. Driver Wu had impure thoughts about Huizu and decided not to miss this opportunity. After breaking free, Huizu pushed him away. Driver Wu was in no hurry to chase after her. He first grabbed the money and then calmly began searching. Huizu hid behind the door and attacked from behind unexpectedly. She was discovered. Driver Wu pushed her down on the sofa. Although everything was going according to plan, there is always a variable in anything. At this moment, Heman has not yet entered. The perverted driver Wu wants to play something different. Just at this critical moment, Paul comes to the rescue in time to save Huizu. He severely disciplines driver Wu. Paul's appearance makes Huizu very worried. If he reveals his identity, 7 years of hard work will be in vain. But seeing Huizu in trouble, how can he just sit by and do nothing? Just then, Heman's voice came. Paul quickly got up and hid. Then Huizu unbuttoned her shirt and screamed loudly. This made Driver Wu suddenly dumbfounded. Heeman heard the noise and came immediately, and Driver Wu saw the situation was not good and fled in a panic. But as soon as he went out the door, he was stopped. Heeman questioned what he was doing, and when he turned around he saw Huizu and noticed that she was not properly dressed. Heeman's face instantly changed. Driver Wu didn't know how to explain and turned and fled. His beloved woman being bullied, this was the last straw for Heeman, and Huizu's goal was considered achieved. Heeman chased him all the way to the roof and didn't give Driver Wu the chance to explain. Huizu got rid of Driver Wu through Heeman. She had been waiting for this moment for 7 years. Greedy Driver Wu paid the price he deserved. When Heeman came to his senses, he immediately contacted his friend, a prosecutor. Jack advised him that as long as Driver Wu was in possession of the murder weapon, it could be considered self-defense. Heeman understood what he meant. As instructed, he wiped the fingerprints off the golf club and put it in Driver Wu's hand. He then called the police and reported that there had been a robbery at his home. Huizu pretended to be shocked and ran into his arms. Heeman felt instantly that everything was worth it. He went to the police station to make a statement. Under Officer Park's arrangement, it was determined that it was self-defense. But what worried Heeman was that Driver Wu was still in the hospital fighting for his life. That night, Huizu came to the hospital room. At this moment, he was no different from his own self back then. Huizu also told him all of his plans. Now, he could get rid of Driver Wu at any time, but Huizu didn't want to get his hands dirty. He wanted these people to fight each other and kill each other. What awaits Driver Wu is the fear of death. Sure enough, Heeman can't sleep or eat. If Driver Wu recovers, he will definitely tell about his previous crimes. From Officer Park, Heeman learns that Driver Wu once threatened to expose him in order to save himself. If anything happens to him, his friend will reveal all the evidence. In that case, President Jiang and Senator Bai's entire family will suffer. For this reason, Heeman immediately asks Officer Park to investigate and find Driver Wu's trusted friend. However, the next day, Heeman receives a delivery, and Jack also received one, which contained the evidence left behind by Driver Wu. 7 years ago, he had threatened Heeman and Jack, and extorted a large sum of money from them. But just in case something happened to him in the future, Driver Wu recorded the conversation. Heeman was at a loss for words, because according to Officer Park's investigation, Driver Wu didn't really have any friends, and no evidence of this recording was found in his home. So who sent this recording? Jack was also on tenterhooks at this moment. If this recording is made public, not only will he lose his job as a prosecutor, he will also go to jail. It turns out that Paul was the one who anonymously sent the recording to the two of them. He got to Officer Park first and found the recording evidence that Driver Wu had. In order to help Huizu complete her revenge plan, Paul sent it to Jack and Heeman. The two of them will definitely cover up the truth to protect themselves. In this way, Driver Wu will eventually die. As expected, Heeman quickly came to the hospital. Seeing Driver Wu in his current state, there is no way he can send the evidence to himself. This made Heeman rack his brains and suffer greatly. After leaving the ward, he instructed Officer Park to get rid of Driver Wu as soon as possible. That night, a hand reached out. Driver Wu never imagined that in the end, he would die at the hands of his own people. But the two of them were always puzzled as to who had sent the audio evidence. They had to find this person as soon as possible. The first step of the revenge plan ended perfectly. Next, Huizu will face a new test. Only by entering Heeman's home can they more comprehensively collect evidence of their crimes. Huizu is grateful to Heeman for his heroic return and accepts his marriage proposal. Paul is very worried about her marrying her enemy. This is undoubtedly sending herself to hell. He doesn't want Huizu to go to a point of no return. But for revenge, Huizu is willing to give everything. Paul only wants to clear his father's injustice. He still has hope for the future. But Huizu is different. All she has in her heart is revenge. She must completely destroy those people. Under Huizu's constant temptation, Heeman took her home. Unexpectedly, President Hyun was also there, snatching his daughter's boyfriend. President Hyun no longer gave Huizu a good face. She and Heeman's mother joined forces. She mocked him. This made Heeman furious. Facing his mother's accusations, he let loose a fierce threat. He would marry Huizu and no one else. And he told President Hyun that he didn't love Lucy at all, and that the only person he wanted to marry was Huizu. Such a decision took the two by surprise. Heeman then dragged Huizu away. At that moment, Paul arrived at the prosecutor's office. He was about to hand over the evidence he had collected over the years to the trusted prosecutor. However, Jack, who was also a prosecutor, soon received the news. Before long, Senator Bai notified President Jiang to get ready. The people from the prosecutor's office would investigate tomorrow morning. President Jiang immediately set about destroying the tax information. At the same time, they realized that there was a mole around them. Jack deliberately left a piece of information on the table. Paul's classmate was tricked as expected. His secret filming of the information was all seen by Jack. He immediately told his father about it. That night, Paul's classmate was silenced. Fortunately, No information about Paul was found in his home, but President Jiang had already hired someone to secretly investigate from within, so it won't be long before they find out who Paul's son is. This oversight also made Paul realize the crisis was approaching, and Heeman also suspected Paul and began to investigate his background. The results came out quickly. Heeman then learned that Paul was related to the hotel singer. His father was framed over the secret funds. Paul must have infiltrated the company to avenge his father. Paul knew he was being watched and feared for his life, so he handed Huizu the USB drive containing evidence of President Zhang's guilt. Sure enough, he was caught by Heeman's men and beaten up. If he wanted to avenge his father, he would make him disappear forever. Paul's identity was exposed. He confessed that he would not let his father die unjustly. He was afraid of implicating Huizu and suggested that the two of them should not associate with each other in the future. Huizu told him not to blame himself too much and promised to help him find out the truth. The next day, Huizu went to Heeman's house in a high-profile manner. This surprised the mother and daughter. Since Huizu had the support of his adoptive parents behind him, the wealthy lady could not stop him either. As long as she was helpful to her son's career, it was not a bad thing for the two to be together. Huizu sat at the table full of enemies. Her heart was already in turmoil. However, Annie felt disgusted with her. After all, she was also an accomplice in persecuting Huizu, and even designed to take over her boyfriend. She asked her mother to stop the two from dating. Madame was also helpless and could only respect her son's choice. But President Hyun is not someone to be trifled with. How could he let his daughter be hurt and not do anything about it? She gave Madame two choices. One was to make Heeman change his mind and beg Lucy to forgive him. The other was to end the partnership between the two companies. This left Madame at a loss and at a crossroads. President Hyun approached Paul about a partnership. She could not swallow the fact that Heeman had hurt her daughter. She wants Paul to come to her company and join forces against Heeman's family. Huizu's revenge plan is going smoothly, but seeing her enemies get away with it, and thinking about her parents' tragic deaths makes her suffer. She wants to die. Paul doesn't want to see her live like this in pain. He persuades Huizu not to ruin her life with revenge. Huizu wants nothing more than to live a good life, but she still rejects Paul's love because she hasn't avenged her parents' deaths. However, plans can change quickly. Huizu's foster parents' company went bankrupt overnight. Huizu was shocked to hear the news. Without the support of her foster parents, how could she fight against the powerful Chaebol family? All her revenge plans would come to nothing. President Zhang was also shocked to hear the news. Huizu's foster parents' company going bankrupt also meant the end of the cooperation between the two families. He blamed his wife for choosing Huizu and abandoning President Hyun. Now they must restore their relationship with President Hyun. This was the only way to protect the interests of their family's company. For the sake of her son's future, Madame had to grovel and beg President Hyun. She hoped that the two children would complete their marriage as soon as possible. President Hyun agreed for the sake of his daughter's happiness. Huizu lost her value and was no longer valued by Madame. After some mockery from the mother and daughter, she was mercilessly kicked out. But Heeman, who was obsessed with her, would never give up on Huizu. He didn't know the real reason for Huizu's sadness. He promised that he would not abandon her. Because of this, he would spend his whole life protecting Huizu. For this reason, Heeman decided to marry behind his parents' backs and even invited Jack to be the witness. Jack was a little disappointed when he received the news. Marrying Heeman was not in Huizu's plan, but now that she had suffered like this, if she wanted to take revenge, she had to make a difficult decision. In the end, Huizu still chose to marry her enemy. This was not a wedding that was welcomed because of love, but it was a path of destruction set out for revenge. And the pain of the two people getting married was not just felt by one person. When Lucy saw the photos of the wedding scene, she found it hard to accept for a while. Who stole her boyfriend? She therefore harbored a grudge against Huizu. Danny was even more grief-stricken when she learned the news. Although Huizu did not admit his identity, he already had the answer in his heart. Thinking about the past with Huizu, Danny's thoughts could not be calm for a long time. Paul also could not understand Huizu's choice. Annie did not hesitate to give Huizu a slap in the face. She let loose a fierce threat, saying that even if she married into the family, she would not let Huizu get away with it, and that Huizu was not angry. She threatened that she would not be able to stay in the family for long. And when she heard this, Annie was furious, and she grabbed Huizu by the hair. This scene was witnessed by Heeman in time. In order to protect his wife, he directly pulled his sister out. Heeman's parents even pretended to be sick to prevent the two from being together. But Heeman simply didn't buy it, and just wanted their blessings. Facing the accusations of the lady of the house, Huizu directly called her mother to beg for forgiveness. The lady of the house was about to lose her temper. Huizu was now of no use to her, so naturally she had a bad attitude. Even though she was humiliated, Huizu endured. She came to this family to make them uneasy. Huizu vowed that in the future, she would show them her cruelty and repay them for all they have done to her. Heman returned home and saw that the wedding room was in complete disarray. He knew that his mother must have done it, so he dragged Huizu over to argue with her. Heman gave his mother two choices. One was to transfer the house to Huizu's name, so that there would be no reason to evict her. The other was for the two of them to move out now, since her son was so tough. Madame had no choice but to give in, but she had one condition, which was to give Huizu a 1-month probation period, during which the two cannot live in the same room, and must also go to the hospital to take care of her father-in-law, to see if she is qualified to be a daughter-in-law. Madame's condition undoubtedly solved a big problem for Huizu. She was also worried about how to refuse to sleep with Heman. In this way, Huizu can rest assured about the next plan. In the evening, Annie called Lucy. She deliberately mocked in front of Huizu. Huizu no longer tolerated it. She picked up her glass and walked up to Annie and splashed it in her face with her hand. Annie, in a rage, started pulling her hair again. Danny, who had witnessed the whole process, quickly went up to pull the two of them apart. What he saw was that it was Huizu's fault. This time Danny did not speak up for Huizu. Annie was so angry that she picked up her water glass and splashed it in Huizu's face. This scene happened to be seen by Heman. The two men each helped their wives, and Huizu and Annie stared at each other with fierce eyes. Danny saw this and quickly pulled Annie away. Huizu pretended to be very aggrieved, and Heman blamed himself for not being able to protect her. The next day, Heman went to his mother's hoping that what happened yesterday would not happen again, or else he would really move out. His mother still wants to rely on her son in the future. Although she was unhappy, she could only reluctantly agree. Seeing that his mother was unhappy, Heman hurriedly tried to cheer her up. Huizu's plan was still in progress. She deliberately asked Jack to have dinner together, and then notified Heman through Jack's secretary. Heman thought that Jack was going out on a date with his sister, but when he called, he learned that it wasn't the case. He didn't even have to think about it. Jack must have gone out with Huizu, so Heman angrily went to find the two of them. At that moment, they arrived at a seaside restaurant. While Jack was in the bathroom, Huizu added something to his drink. Soon Jack fell asleep in the car. Meanwhile, Heman also rushed over. Huizu quickly closed his eyes when he saw him. Seeing Huizu sleeping soundly, Heman immediately carried her to his car. At this time, Jack also woke up. He got out of the car and staggered towards this direction. Heman was full of anger and gave him a punch in the face. He would not allow Jack to explain. Heman thought that he was trying to plot something. Huizu was in the car watching the fun. The two would never reconcile until the day they died. Annie came to comfort Jack after learning that he was injured. The two have been in contact for many years. Even the child is Jack's. Danny, however, knows nothing about this. Huizu, on the other hand, has long since discovered their relationship. She has a big surprise for the reporter. Just as Annie is about to leave, a group of reporters swarm over her. One is a popular actor, and the other is a prosecutor. The two are having a secret rendezvous. This is definitely explosive news. It will have a huge impact on the future of the two. While everything is going well, Huizu will face a formidable opponent. That is Lucy, who has been robbed of her boyfriend. She will become a stumbling block on Huizu's road to revenge. But Huizu's revenge plan, which she has been preparing for 7 years, will not be disrupted by the appearance of Lucy. First, she forged a 10 billion inheritance letter through a friend abroad. She deliberately sent this document to the family. Driven by curiosity, the mother and daughter opened it. Soon, Heman also received the news. His wife's receipt of such a large sum of money shocked him. The two are already married. So what is yours and mine? With this money, there is no need to open your own company. So Heman tried to please Huizu as much as possible. He not only transferred the house to Huizu's name, but also gave her 5% of the company's shares. The mother and daughter were full of disbelief when they learned of this. Heman even warned his sister that if she bullied his wife again in the future, he would throw her out. When Huizu saw the document opened and knew that they had been fooled, she made up an excuse to acquire an overseas company, and she would be responsible for all the acquisition funds. Heman was deeply moved and secretly delighted that he had such a good wife, but he had no idea that it was all Huizu's plot. Huizu would make a bigger move next. The next day, President Zhang found a newspaper on his desk with news of the accident that had happened to Huizu's family. This terrified him. His wife also wondered where the newspaper had come from. Not only President Zhang, but also Heman and Jack received it. They all had the same expression the moment they saw the newspaper. When Jack even received a threatening phone call from the dead driver Wu. This was of course Huizu's doing, but as the saying goes, if you keep walking by the river, sooner or later you'll get your shoes wet. Huizu and the nanny secretly passed recordings at home, and President Zhang discovered this. When the wife asked what to do after reading the newspaper, President Zhang told her that he had already caught someone. Soon the nanny's information was found out. President Zhang then learned that the nanny had a deep grudge against him. Back then, Her husband jumped to his death because he hadn't been paid, and the nanny had also been recommended by Paul a few years ago. Officer Park used the nanny's two daughters to threaten and force her to tell the truth about who was behind it all. The nanny had to compromise for the sake of her daughters. In the end, she still told them who Huizu was. President Jiang was shocked when he heard the news. How could someone who had died come back to life? Huizu must have come to avenge her parents. All kinds of mysteries plagued President Jiang. Huizu had no idea about any of this and was still going ahead with her plan. Auntie Paul informed Huizu that the nanny had been exposed and told her to escape from that home as soon as possible. Huizu panicked when she heard this. Has all her hard work over the years come to nothing? She calms herself down and sorts through the information in her hands. Unwilling to accept this, Huizu must determine what President Jiang will do. At this moment, President Jiang is in deep thought, because Huizu's mother had said personally that Huizu is her biological daughter. This has left him in a state of confusion. He cannot help but regret the mistake he made back then. Huizu's return interrupts his thoughts. President Jiang pretends to be unconcerned and deliberately tests himself to see if he will kill Huizu, but he wants to make sure of Huizu's purpose for coming to this family. The two are caught in a psychological game. President Jiang is torn about how to get Huizu to open her mouth and tell everything. It will also be detrimental to the company. What will Huizu do if he reveals the secret? And Huizu still has Heman as a shield. She will never admit to her identity even if she is killed. The tension is so high that you can hear breathing. The dropping of a few apples breaks the deadlock. The two smile at each other and do not continue the conversation. That night, President Jiang asked Danny to come and test him to see if he knew Huizu's real identity. Danny said that he loved his wife very much and didn't want to mention the past. This statement dispelled President Jiang's doubts, but Danny had just told Huizu everything. This worried Huizu. President Jiang learned of his identity, and what President Jiang was thinking at the moment was that he had to separate the illegitimate daughter from his son. Since Jack and Annie were photographed by the press last time, although the news has been suppressed for the time being, the two of them could be ruined at any time. For this reason, Jack proposed to take his daughter and go far away. However, Annie immediately refused, because the person she has always loved in her heart is Danny. The secret affair she had with Jack was just a matter of each taking what they wanted. Hearing this, Jack was extremely sad. At the same time, Huizu quietly went upstairs. This scene happened to be noticed by President Jiang. Because Danny's computer has a lot of information about her past, she must delete it as soon as possible. Huizu tried many times and used her birthday to unlock the password. Just as she was watching the old videos and feeling sad about them, she turned her head and discovered that President Jiang was standing next to her. Huizu quickly closed the computer. At this point, President Jiang did not hide it and made it clear that he already knew her identity. Huizu also stopped hiding and confessed that she came back to avenge her parents. Just as the two were arguing, President Jiang fell down the stairs. Huizu came to her senses and went forward to check on President Jiang's life. She quickly called for help and learned that they were the only two people at home. Auntie Paul told Huizu to leave the scene quickly so she could create an alibi. Huizu immediately left in the car, but Annie happened to come back, and she vaguely saw Huizu's figure. President Jiang was soon discovered, and Huizu came to the supermarket absent-mindedly, but she received a phone call shortly afterwards from Heman informing her that her father was being resuscitated, and urging Huizu not to run around and to wait for news at home. President Jiang's life was not in danger, but he had a serious brain hemorrhage. It was uncertain when he would wake up. Later, Huizu went to the hospital. Annie asked her if she had been at home at the time. Huizu, who was well prepared, gave her alibi. Heman was furious and scolded his sister for being paranoid. Annie was in no hurry to expose the truth. Her father would know the whole story when he woke up. Madame told Huizu to look after them here and went out to eat. Huizu looked at the unconscious President Jiang without the slightest sympathy. She fled not because she was afraid, but because she was afraid that she would not be able to take revenge. She hoped that President Jiang would wake up, so that she could show him how she would destroy his family. Just then, Paul walked in. He was worried that something would happen to Huizu. He hoped that Huizu would leave as soon as possible before President Jiang woke up, but Huizu still refused to back down. Unexpectedly, Heman pushed open the door at this time. Huizu, in a hurry, slapped Paul hard, and accused him of using a visit as an excuse to mock the president. Paul understood that Huizu wanted to hide the real reason for his visit, so he cooperated and played along with the charade. Heman didn't suspect anything, but he stopped Paul and warned him that he would kill him if he showed up again. However, when Annie returned home, she accidentally saw a button at the top of the stairs. In no time, She was in Huizu's room and matched the button on Huizu's clothes. Annie was sure that her father's accident was related to her, so she immediately told her brother about it. But Heeman just thought it was normal for a button to fall off at home. He also advised his sister not to falsely accuse people again or she would not get away with it. Annie had no choice but to tell her mother about it. Although the lady believed her daughter's words, she couldn't make a conclusion without evidence. She was just wondering what Huizu's motive was. Danny came back and saw that the computer was on, because the password was Huizu's birthday. Only she could open it except herself. Then Danny found Huizu at the company and asked her if she had done it on purpose. Just as Huizu was leaving, she was spotted by Officer Park. He told Annie about the current situation of Danny meeting Huizu. Annie then went to Danny's study and accidentally discovered that he still kept photos of his ex-girlfriend. Huizu looked exactly like his current sister-in-law, especially those innocent eyes that she had every time she was bullied by herself. Her husband, as her former boyfriend, talking to her in private again aroused Annie's suspicions. Lucy lied to Heeman to win him back, claiming that she was pregnant with his child, as they still needed President Hyun's investment. Heeman could only hope that Huizu's adoptive parents would transfer the money. Then he could rest assured and ignore the mother and daughter. Later, Lucy asked Huizu to come over and deliberately took out a pair of baby shoes. Huizu didn't want to hurt her, but she had no choice but to seek revenge. She could only silently beg Lucy's forgiveness in her heart. That night, a woman came to the ward. It turned out that she was President John's lover, and they had a young son together, who had always lived in their home, without knowing that his biological mother was someone else. But the president's wife was always uneasy about Tom's presence, for fear that he would take her son's inheritance. Huizu continued with her next plan. That night, she pretended to be in a bad mood and had a drink with Heeman, pouring out her heart. It was the first time the two had been alone since they got married, and Huizu wanted to take this opportunity to prepare for her revenge. The next day, Madame barges in and finds the two of them lying intimately in bed. She had also promised President Hyun that she would win her son back if she had a child. She didn't know how she would explain it. In a fit of anger, Madame throws a bucket of cold water over them. Huizu doesn't take her words to heart. Her mother-in-law scolds her for being shameless. Annie then brings another bucket of water. Heeman can't stand this kind of nonsense anymore and directly shouts at the two of them to get out. Annie then comes over. She mocked Huizu for using despicable tactics to get what she wanted, and Huizu retorted that it was only natural for Heeman and her to share a room as husband and wife. Annie was furious when she heard this. Huizu warned her that if she splashed a drop of coffee in her face, then she would splash back with the boiling hot water in the pot next to her, and with that she got up and took it. Annie was a little scared. Huizu told her to behave herself in this household or else she would be thrown out. Annie still stuck to her guns. Huizu once again picked up the pot, and seeing that she seemed serious, Annie had no choice but to leave in disgrace. In no time, she told Lucy about it. Learning that the two of them were sharing the same room, Lucy felt threatened. Soon, she came to Heeman's house. She even tore up the two of them wedding photos in front of Huizu, and she let Huizu know that she would not let her get away with it. After she got pregnant with Heeman's child, she would also give birth in this family. Heeman and his mother rushed over upon hearing the news. Since she also has a business partnership with President Hyun, the lady naturally had to help Lucy. Huizu, who had come for revenge, had no intention of arguing about such things. She turned around and left. That day, Huizu met with Jack again and deliberately tried to drive a wedge between him and Heeman. She said that she had learned from Heeman that Jack had no friends and was isolated since childhood. Out of sympathy, she had made friends with him. The arrogant Jack, upon learning that Heeman had slandered him behind his back, gnashed his teeth with hatred. He suppressed his anger. He helped him so much, but he was ungrateful. This made Jack very angry. Having achieved his goal, Huizu went to Heeman again and told him that his father-in-law had transferred a large sum of money to his mistress, and also transferred him some shares in the group. Heeman was furious when he heard the news. Huizu told him not to worry too much, and that he would help him once the money from his adoptive parents had been credited. Heeman was full of gratitude. Just as the two of them were about to express their love, Lucy suddenly burst in. She took out a photo of Huizu meeting Jack. It turned out that she had been sending someone to spy on Huizu, which made Heeman very angry. He warned Lucy not to do such stupid things. He trusted his wife more than anyone. Huizu persuaded her husband not to be stubborn. She didn't want to have a conflict with Lucy, but Lucy blamed everything on her. She wouldn't stop until she had ruined Huizu. Later, Heeman found Jack and mocked him, saying that he should stop hanging out at the park. Jack sensed that there was something else behind Heeman's words. He retorted that Heeman didn't have the confidence to do so, and even had to spy on his own wife. The two men instantly became tense. Jack then started talking about what happened 7 years ago. The once good friends had turned against each other. Anyone who saw them felt bad for them. Huizu looked at the photo of her parents and felt incredibly lonely. The road to revenge was full of obstacles. She could only remind herself not to forget her original intentions. Once, Huizu's parents were Heeman's guards. Although their lives were simple, They were a happy family. Who could never have imagined such a huge change? Now Huizu is running out of time. What happens next is even more unpredictable. Then she went to President Zhang's hospital room. Huizu instead hoped that he would wake up soon so she could face the challenge and let him feel 100 times more pain than her parents. However, just then President Zhang suddenly opened his eyes and grabbed Huizu's neck. After a struggle, she finally pushed him away. Huizu was still in shock when her mother arrived in the ward. When Huizu turned her head again, President Zhang was lying there quietly. Fortunately, he had only recovered temporarily. Huizu ran out of the ward, thinking about what to do next. At that moment, Paul appeared and pulled her back. Seeing Huizu's panicked look, Paul anxiously asked what had happened. After learning that President Zhang had woken up, he hoped that Huizu would leave that family as soon as possible. While the two were talking, Paul noticed something unusual. He told Huizu not to turn around. Someone was spying on them, and the person spying on them was Lucy. Annie had already suspected Huizu, and the two of them decided to thoroughly investigate Huizu's identity. Immediately afterwards, they sent the footage they had taken to Heeman. He came to the hospital in a rage, but what he saw was the security guard expelling Paul. Huizu, meanwhile, accused him of harassing her and turned away. Heeman walked up to the security guard and sent him away. He warned Paul that if he continued to harass his family, he would definitely make him regret it for the rest of his life. Paul mentioned that his father's death was related to their family, just to get some information from Huizu. He also told Heeman to be prepared, that sooner or later he would find out the truth and avenge his father. These words dispelled Heeman's suspicions about Huizu. After arriving at the ward, his mother told him about his father's lover. Madame was worried that the president would transfer a large sum of money and shares to his lover and his son. If they continued to ignore it, the inheritance rights would likely be swallowed up. She is even more afraid that the president has made a will without telling them. The important thing now is to find the will. If we wait until President Zhang wakes up, it will be too late. And the wife suggested putting the other person in a mental hospital. That way, even if there is a will, it will not take effect, and they can even seize the property and shares that will be transferred to the lover and her son. Just as the two were plotting, President Zhang seemed to have heard something. He was so angry that his body convulsed violently. This scared the mother and son a lot. The doctor quickly came and calmed President Zhang's emotions. Heeman suspected that his father was faking, and his intention was to pass on the inheritance to his mistress and her son. This made Heeman begin to hate President Zhang. He hoped that his father would never wake up. Lucy tried again and again to cause trouble for Huizu, but she avoided her every time. Instead, Heeman blamed everything on herself. Lucy didn't know what to do about Huizu. The next day, she came to the house like crazy. This confusing behavior left Huizu at a loss. Annie and Madame came running when they heard the noise. Lucy falsely accused Huizu of pushing her down. Huizu was speechless when she heard this. Before leaving, Lucy warned that if anything happened to her unborn child, she would never let her go. Madame scolded her for being so vicious. Huizu didn't want to explain anything. She couldn't just sit there and do nothing, so she forged a pregnancy report and let Heeman see it on purpose. Heeman happily told his mother the good news. Madame was not happy at all, but instead wanted Huizu to get an abortion. If President Hyun finds out, the cooperation between the two families will be ruined. This makes Heeman feel even more difficult. He doesn't know how to explain it. Lucy tells her mother about being bullied. President Hyun comes directly to the house and slaps Huizu hard. He angrily scolds him for wanting his daughter to have an abortion. Huizu explains that he is also going to be a mother. It was Lucy who accidentally slipped and had nothing to do with it. Madam is now scared. President Hyun, learning that Huizu is pregnant, turns his anger on the wife and asks her how she could have agreed to this. The wife tries to explain that she promised Huizu that she would not let her give birth. President Hyun turns away in anger. Heeman comforts her mother, telling her not to worry, and that Huizu will soon be able to inherit 10 billion won from her adoptive parents. She also promises to use the money to help herself. Hearing this, the wife is overjoyed and vows to treat Huizu better in the future. She also plans to stop currying favor with President Hyun. The mother and daughter, the two fake pregnant women, have caused havoc in this family, but Lucy is not going to give up. While Huizu was no longer secretly taking her makeup, because Annie always suspected Huizu's identity. Lucy also needs to confirm this through fingerprints and blood type. Since Annie decided not to come with Jack, the original Jack was therefore extremely depressed, so he went directly to Danny and told all the secrets. Danny learned that her daughter was not her biological child and was deeply shocked, and all of this was also heard by Huizu. If Annie hadn't said she was pregnant with his child, Danny would never have abandoned Huizu, who was paralyzed and bedridden. Now it seems like punishment for himself. He came to the place where he often dated Huizu, but found Huizu sitting there in a daze. Danny felt so guilty. He didn't know what Huizu had gone through back then, or why he had hidden his identity and returned. Huizu hated him for abandoning her. If he had stayed by her side, their child would not have died. Danny was stunned to learn that Huizu had once been pregnant with his child, but no amount of tears can make up for the mistakes of the past. The two were not meant to be, and there is no way they can be together again. Danny found out that someone had been taking care of Huizu after he left, even though Auntie Paul denied it. Danny still pursued the matter of Huizu's pregnancy. He also found out that Huizu had scar revision surgery. After Danny's thorough investigation, he learned that Huizu's son, who was born 7 years ago, was adopted. Huizu was very confused because her Aunt Paul had said that she had given birth to a daughter who had died at birth. Huizu wanted to find out everything and went to her aunt. Her aunt, who was panicking, insisted that it was a daughter and that Danny might have made a mistake. Huizu didn't think much of it at first. After she left, her aunt immediately called Paul and told him that Huizu had just asked about the child. Paul persuaded his aunt to give the child back to Huizu so that she might change her mind about revenge. It turned out that her aunt's son was Huizu's. After all, she had raised him for 7 years, and she had feelings for the child. The selfish aunt didn't want to tell the truth. Meanwhile, the mother and son began to make plans. They decided to find someone to forge a will as soon as President Jiang woke up. However, at that moment, Annie called to inform her father that he had woken up. This news made Heeman so angry that he didn't know what to do. At the same time, Huizu also became worried. She recorded all of Heeman's family's crimes. What puzzled Huizu was that President Jiang woke up but did not expose her identity. It is also possible that President Jiang realized his current situation and did not say a word while lying in the hospital bed. Huizu always felt that something was wrong. What is even more absurd is that President Jiang actually shed tears in front of her. President Hyun came looking for him that day, since his wife has not fulfilled any of the promises she made, and his daughter is not in good health. He has decided to terminate all cooperation with their family. President Hyun wants to wait for Heeman to make a sensible choice before making any plans. However, Heeman is not at all panicked. He is only looking forward to the Huizu foster parents' money being credited to his account. But the most important thing now is to forge a will as soon as possible before his father fully regains consciousness. But just as the lawyer was leaving with the will, President Jiang suddenly spoke up. Huizu first came up to him and then announced some heavy news. The president said that the will was invalid. However, the wife did not agree. Heeman even sent the lawyer away first. Now the president is just a useless person at the mercy of others. His wife urges him not to fight a losing battle. It's hard to say if he'll be able to open his eyes tomorrow. Heeman has already bribed the lawyer, and the will soon come into effect. Huizu is just waiting for them to turn on each other and kill each other. President Hyun has had financial problems since he withdrew his investment, and Heeman's company is running into problems. In case the company goes bankrupt, Heeman decides to borrow money from loan sharks. No matter what, the company must survive until next month. Now he just hopes that Huizu's adoptive parents' money will arrive. President Jiang is discharged from the hospital and comes home to convalesce. Huizu comes to mock him and even says that she is pregnant with Heeman's child. Hearing this, President Jiang becomes emotional. He finds it hard to accept this truth. His body starts to twitch uncontrollably again. Tom hears the noise and comes running. The two discuss sending President Jiang back to the hospital. Later, Huizu calls his wife. She is relaxing at the moment, having a massage. She tells Huizu that there is no need to send him to the hospital. Whether he lives or dies is up to his own karma. President Jiang was in a difficult situation. Perhaps this was his retribution. Then Danny came looking for him. Through his investigations over the past few days, he had determined that Huizu had given birth to a boy, who had lied and said it was a girl, and who had deliberately said that the baby had died at birth. There must have been a reason for this person to hide the truth. These words made Huizu suddenly realize that it was Paul who had told her that her daughter had died at birth. Moreover, her aunt had never married. So where did her son come from? Huizu felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity whenever she saw the child. Although her aunt had found excuses to get away with it, Huizu couldn't help but doubt the matter. Her heart was torn as she wanted to find out everything. Facing Huizu's questioning, her aunt became flustered. Seeing her stammer, Huizu pulled her along and said she wanted to take the child for a paternity test. At this point, her aunt could no longer hide. She told the child's true identity. Her aunt apologized for her selfishness. But how can such a thing be forgiven so easily? If Huizu knew that she had a son, her revenge plan might have taken a different path. How could she have gone down the path to her own destruction? Ready to die? Huizu ran out like crazy, looking for her son. Danny happened to be back with the children. When she saw her son, Huizu burst into tears, but when she saw her aunt coming out, the child pushed Huizu away and ran into his mother's arms. Once again, he was deeply shocked. Huizu could hardly calm down. His aunt begged her to give her some time, in order not to hurt the child. Huizu could only agree. She went to the beach alone and thought about the bits and pieces of the years with her child. She was glad that she had been by her son's side, but she could not forgive her aunt for hiding it from her for a while. When Danny asked if she had found her son, Huizu did not tell the truth. If he had not abandoned her, she would not have ended up in such a situation. To Huizu, Danny was just a target of revenge. Letting go of the past would only affect the speed of her revenge. Heman is worried about the company's finances. Lucy takes the opportunity to get him back. If she does, her mother will restart the investment. But Heman is unmoved and still refuses. He just hopes Huizu will help him. However, the next day, when Huizu delivers food to President Jiang, she discovers that he has sat up, fighting. The president says, "You are my daughter." Of course, Huizu doesn't believe this nonsense. How could she be the daughter of such a monster? President Jiang was so emotional that he confessed all the mistakes he had made back then. Huizu still refused to accept it. An angry Huizu rushed forward and blocked President Jiang's mouth, yelling at him if he was crazy. Hearing the commotion, Annie pushed the door open. She mistakenly thought that Huizu wanted to kill her father. After returning to her room, Huizu could not calm down for a long time. President Jiang was conscious. So why did he say such nonsense? Could it be because he was afraid of her revenge? A ploy he came up with to delay his recovery? Huizu dares not think any further. She can only pray that what he said is not true. After President Jiang calms down, Annie tells her brother what she just saw. Heman doesn't believe her at all. He thinks she is trying to drive a wedge between him and Huizu again. Huizu wakes up and finds her aunt again. She and Paul are her saviors. Sometimes she feels like a sister, sometimes like a mother. Part of the reason for hiding the child is also to protect her. Huizu can understand her aunt. These words make her aunt feel extremely ashamed. Huizu often plays with her son to strengthen their bond. Paul just hopes that Huizu can see the child's point of view and not get herself into a situation she can't get out of. And he tells Huizu that Lucy has already had her fingerprints taken. Her identity will soon be revealed. Huizu definitely will not give up on the path of revenge. Danny has not given up on finding her biological son, but her aunt is disgusted with her. She abandoned Huizu back then. So how can she have the face to come looking for her child now? Her aunt immediately threw her out, because President Jiang kept saying that she was his daughter. Huizu went to the hospital nervously to do a paternity test, and learned that the paternity was established. This made her feel mixed emotions. After returning, Huizu told President Jiang about the paternity test, and asked what he would do if she were his daughter and what he would do again. Huizu angrily cursed President Jiang for insulting her mother, and vowed to use every means to make him feel pain. It turned out that Huizu had done 2 paternity tests, one with her son and the other with President Jiang. The 2 reports confirmed that the child was Huizu's, and that her paternity with President Jiang was not established. It was only now that Huizu understood her mother's good intentions. Back then, her mother lied and said she was President Jiang's daughter, simply because she wanted President Jiang to feel guilty and suffer, and also to protect herself from being persecuted. Now that Huizu knows everything, she will definitely seek justice on her mother's behalf. Next, she arranged for President Jiang's lover to come to the house. When President Jiang saw her, he begged her to take him away, or he will soon be tortured to death by the mother and son. Just as Tom pushes him out, Heman happens to return home. He goes up to his father's lover and is about to throw her out. President Jiang falls out of his wheelchair in excitement. He doesn't care about this at all. Tom knows that she is his biological mother. Naturally, he will not allow Heman's rude behavior. The 2 brothers fight as a result. President Jiang is heartbroken about this. In the end, he still couldn't escape. Huizu sent her care thoughtfully. She told President Jiang that the company he built with his own hands would go bankrupt under his own plan, and that the secret that Annie had hidden for many years had also been revealed. Danny learned that his daughter was not his biological child, and he doesn't know what irrational behavior he will do to Annie next. His beloved son and wife are even more determined to send her to a mental hospital. Everything makes President Jiang's heart ache. Huizu's foster parents have not settled the money yet, which makes Heman anxious, and now all the payments are being rushed. If this continues, the company won't last for many more days. Jack went to great lengths to get Annie. He encouraged his wife to let Heman go and save Lucy. That way, President Hyun could save the company from the crisis it faced, and then frame Huizu and Danny for having an affair and kick them both out of the house. Considering that Huizu's tens of billions of inheritance had not been paid out for a long time, his wife immediately agreed to the idea. That night, his mother implored Heman to save the company. If President Hyun does not come to the rescue in time, then the entire group will face a crisis. Heman realized the severity of the problem and reluctantly agreed. The next day he met with Lucy and fell to his knees, begging for forgiveness. Now only her mother could help him. Lucy finally relented and agreed. Then she found Huizu and deliberately played the recording of Heman confessing to her. She then asked Huizu what he thought. For Lucy, Heman was no longer that important. What she wants is to take revenge on Huizu for stealing her boyfriend. Sooner or later, she will be kicked out of this house. One day, Huizu received a phone call. The police officer asked to meet her. She said that the results of the fingerprints that Lucy had asked to be tested were in the fingerprints of the current Jenny, who died 7 years ago. matched Huizu's, and Huizu admitted her identity. She said that she still had grievances that had not been resolved. The police officer knew a little about it and did not make things difficult for her. Huizu had been prepared for this. The police officer took the money and promised to keep the secret. To thank President Hyun for saving the company, Madam specially prepared a family dinner. Huizu came back and asked what was the occasion. Heeman wanted to explain but was stopped. Seeing President Hyun's menacing eyes, he had to hold back. Huizu doesn't pamper them. After all, the family has been transferred to her name. She is not stingy and lends them a free meal. A table full of food suddenly made them lose their appetite. That night Huizu once again took out the recording of Driver Wu and called Madam on the phone. Hearing the voice of Driver Wu, she screamed in fright. Heeman heard it and immediately ran in. Madam pointed to the window and thought it was Driver Wu who had come to collect a debt. Heeman opened the door and it turned out to be Annie. She also came running when she heard the voice. Madam had a guilty conscience and was on tenterhooks all day. After her emotions calmed down, she ran into President Jung's room and blamed him for all the torment she had suffered. If it weren't for him sleeping with Huizu's mother, would she have sent someone to run her over? Having a lover wasn't enough. He even took the nanny who managed the villa. He was sneaking around with God knows how many other women. After hearing this, the chairman lost control of himself and kept saying that Huizu was his own daughter. At that moment, Huizu suddenly walked in and said that the chairman looked like he was going to die. He must be sent to a mental hospital for treatment. Hearing this, the chairman could only struggle to calm himself down. Seeing him like this, the chairman had long since grown disgusted. Huizu must never be allowed to resurrect their company. For this reason, she must stir up trouble in the family, so she took out the paternity test and learned that Huizu was not her biological daughter. President Jung then realized that he had been deceived. The reason why her mother lied and said that she was his daughter was to protect Huizu from persecution. An angry President Jung grabbed Huizu's clothes, and that played right into Huizu's hands. She cried out for help, attracting the attention of the lady of the house. Seeing Huizu's disheveled appearance, the lady of the house was shocked. She had long known that her husband was unfaithful, but she never imagined that even though he was bedridden, he was still thinking about his daughter-in-law. She scolded her husband for being beyond cure. How would the president explain it? He even told her Huizu's true identity. In the lady of the house's opinion, he was just mentally abnormal. Then the lady found the contact information for the mental hospital, but when she tried to make the call, she hesitated. Huizu outside the door could see that she was having second thoughts. In order to make the lady make a decision as soon as possible, she cried and told Heeman about it. Heeman was furious when he heard and immediately instructed Officer Park to send his father away. The lady no longer hesitated and agreed to send the president to the mental hospital. Huizu informed that this was not her own personal achievement. There was also her precious son and dear lady. When this family no longer existed, Huizu said she would go and tell him herself. President Jung tried to resist but was powerless. Soon the hospital staff arrived. Facing Huizu's hateful gaze, President Jung hated that he couldn't kill her, but as soon as a sedative was injected, he immediately became quiet. The evil President Jung, who had committed so many crimes, was sent to a mental hospital while still sane. This would be even more terrifying than falling into hell. The domineering Chaebol chairman came to an end. At this moment, Huizu did not feel relieved, because she will face more than one thing next. Madam forces Huizu to sign a divorce agreement in order to get President Hyun's investment. She cannot leave now. She lies and says that she and Heeman love each other deeply. Madam knows that it is not that easy to get Huizu to sign. She wants to see how long Huizu can hold out. Heeman has to get close to Lucy for the sake of the company, and Lucy deliberately gets him drunk and stays the night. President Hyun also wants her daughter to get what she wants. She threw a huge temptation at Madam. She is the only daughter he has, and her future son-in-law will inevitably inherit everything from the company. If Lucy marries Heeman, it means the two companies will merge. Madam was overjoyed after hearing this. The current situation is very unfavorable for Huizu. She must firmly grasp Heeman's heart and drive Lucy away. For this reason, Huizu deliberately met with Paul. Heeman was furious when he learned about this, and immediately went over to the two of them. Paul cooperated with Huizu's performance, and Heeman saw the whole thing. His anger flared up instantly. Huizu wanted Heeman to understand through this incident that if he continued with Lucy, he might be taken away by someone else. Paul took this opportunity to speak his mind, and scolded Heeman for disregarding Huizu's feelings for the sake of profit. If Huizu was abandoned, he would defend her at all costs. Seeing that her goal had been achieved, Huizu deliberately took Heeman's side and accused Paul of being too rude. No one can replace her feelings for Heeman. Huizu once again exerts pressure on Heeman to make a decision. If she is no longer needed, she can let go. Heeman hurriedly explained after hearing this. He only drank too much last night and nothing happened with Lucy. He hopes Huizu can understand his true feelings. In order to appease Huizu, Heeman dismissed company affairs. The two went shopping and on a date. looking so sweet. Lucy received a photo of the police officer meeting with Huizu. She realized that the police officer must have found something out and was deliberately hiding something from her, so she immediately asked the police officer out. The police officer was quite loyal and didn't tell her the truth. Lucy told Annie about this. The two of them felt that there must be something being hidden. Just as Heman and Huizu returned home, Lucy saw the intimacy between the two and was deeply shocked. Madame was also worried about hurting her feelings. She rushed into the room and scolded Huizu. At this moment, Lucy had a lot of thoughts running through her mind. Indeed, you can't believe a word a man says. Heman had begged her to trust him, saying that he would slowly distance himself from Huizu. Now it seems that was just a delaying tactic. Pissed off, Lucy left directly. Undaunted, she made an appointment with Huizu the next day. She made it clear that meeting with the police officer was to cover up the truth. Naturally, Huizu couldn't admit it. He got up to leave, but Lucy stopped him. If there was nothing to hide, then let's do another fingerprint identification. Huizu ignored her and left immediately. Lucy was not giving up, and it seemed like she had a chance. If nothing unexpected happened, then an accident would happen. As the two were struggling, Lucy fell down the stairs. However, Huizu did not realize that she had been tricked. Taking this opportunity, Lucy finally got rid of the fact that she was pretending to be pregnant. She falsely accused Huizu of pushing her down the steps and causing her to miscarry. When she learned that her daughter had suffered such harm, President Hyun was furious. She blamed everything on Heman and demanded that Huizu divorce her immediately. Otherwise, she would withdraw all of the company's investments. When she learned that Lucy had miscarried, Huizu blamed herself for taking an innocent child's life. This was not what she wanted to see. The source of all this tragedy was Heman's family. Huizu wanted to speed up her revenge. Rescuing Lucy from the devil would be her atonement. When it was all over, Huizu would kneel and beg Lucy and her child for forgiveness. Madame became worried at this moment. If President Hyun completely divested, the company would be completely finished. In order to calm President Hyun's anger, Huizu returned home and the wife immediately told her to pack her bags and leave. Unexpectedly, Huizu not only agreed to leave, but also signed a divorce agreement. With Paul's help, Huizu secretly got the mentally ill President Jiang out and sent him to his lover to take care of him. They just wanted to use this to make President Jiang re-establish his will and transfer all his property to Tom's name. Huizu just wanted this family to fight with each other and kill each other. She also asked her aunt to protect the children. The brutal war has only just begun. Huizu's mother forces her to sign the divorce papers, which Heman cannot believe. She knows she loves Huizu, so why can't she just let her go? Heman threatens to kill himself, which terrifies his mother. However, the lawyer delivers President Jiang's new will, which is even more troubling for Heman. He is already in a desperate situation, and now it's even worse. Even though he is already standing at the edge of a cliff with no way back, he knows that if he doesn't accept President Hyun's proposal, the company will be finished. But Heman still confessed to Lucy that Huizu was the only woman he had ever loved and that he could never give her up. He fell to his knees and begged Lucy for forgiveness. But at this point, Lucy didn't want Heman because of love. She wanted revenge more out of her hatred for Huizu. No matter what, Lucy still refused to let go. President Hyun couldn't understand how Heman would abandon everything for a woman. Heman was never a simple person. I'm sure there's something to fall back on. That's why she didn't accept their help. Now Heman just hopes that Huizu's adoptive parents' money will be credited. President Hyun demands that Heman let her manage the company if she wants to accept her investment. Without Huizu's life-saving straw, Heman really doesn't know how to live anymore. For the sake of her son and the company, Madame has no choice but to agree to Huizu's return. However, Huizu is not going to go back so easily, and she also has to sell the house as compensation for the divorce. Madame then realizes that she has made a big mistake. After returning home, she angrily told Heman about this matter, and the exhausted Heman did not care about this, and wanted his mother to take Huizu back no matter what, which gave Madame a big problem. With no choice, she went to the restaurant to prepare a cup of water to extinguish the anger in her heart. However, at that moment, a hand rested on her shoulder. Madame screamed in fear. President Jiang's return this time was to take revenge. Huizu had arranged it. She wanted this family to fight with each other, so that they can experience the feeling of being dragged into hell by the people closest to them. After calming down, Madame scolds him for how he can divide the family property equally with the son born to his lover. She persuades her husband to write another will. President Jiang suffers the pain of being locked up in a mental hospital. He is ready to go and decides to turn himself in at the prosecutor's office to stop being tortured in that dark place. And he also reveals Huizu's true identity. But to Madame, he is just rambling nonsense, was not in his right mind and was just making up excuses for his previous transgressions against her. Meanwhile, Heman found Huizu, and, after much pleading, Huizu returned. Huizu's return was to witness a grand show. President Jiang thought his son was a sensible man, and told him that Huizu was the reason he was in his current state. Before he could finish speaking, Huizu rushed forward and pretended to be concerned. President Jiang wanted to strangle her. This made Heman completely furious. He told Huizu to leave and scolded his father for being out of his mind. What Heman cannot forgive is that he had the idea of hitting Huizu that day. President Jiang, however, could not say a word for a long time. Heman had already lost patience. After Annie came in, President Jiang begged for help. He did not want to be sent to a mental hospital again. Annie came to plead that his father was mentally fine. Heman told her to stay put. This was a decision made with his mother. If you want to continue living in this family, don't say anything. The staff from the mental hospital soon arrived. Tom stepped forward to stop his brother, but Heman was determined. No one could persuade him. Annie also cried and said she was sorry, indicating that she was also unable to do anything. President Jiang had no one to rely on. He could only struggle and beg his son to let him stay. Despite this, Heman was unmoved. Tom wanted to ask the madam to go over and persuade him, but she paid no attention. She had long since lost her feelings for President Jiang. At this moment, he really didn't want to be locked up in a mental hospital again, but he was still forcibly taken away by the staff. Watching this devilish family fight with each other for selfish reasons, Huizu felt so much joy in her heart. In order to invalidate the president's will in advance, and prevent him from turning himself in and implicating himself, she had no choice but to completely turn her into a mental patient. At the behest of the madam, a large amount of strong medicine was added to the president's medicine. Poor President Jiang was helpless, and ultimately paid a tragic price for his sinful actions. The madam didn't want to offend either side. While supporting Lucy and Heman together, she also promised to give her and Heman a grand wedding once Huizu's funds arrived to save the company. And then Huizu set her sights on Jack for revenge. Han Minister, who had been undercover all along, made it clear that he would publish the evidence of Jack and his father's abuse of power over the years. What made Jack even more desperate was still to come. Huizu directly exposed his relationship with Annie. Just as Annie was filming an advertisement, the staff gathered together and discussed it. Annie curiously went up to check and found that she had become the front page headline. Jack was removed from his position as prosecutor due to his inappropriate behavior. Senator Bai, who was under investigation, burst into tears when he heard the news. He had long expected his son to be ruined by this woman, but his son had ignored his advice. Senator Bai, who was waiting for his son to save him, had completely lost hope. Annie was also caught up in the storm. The movie she starred in as an advertising spokesperson was called off one after the other. She was also waiting for huge compensation. When Danny saw this news, she concluded that everything was Huizu's doing. That night, he secretly followed. Huizu deliberately lured him out so that the public would believe that Danny had spread this explosive news. Han Minister approached and greeted him warmly, but Danny didn't know him at all, and Huizu was already gone when he turned his head. Officer Park saw the whole scene of their conversation. The reason Danny tolerated Huizu's abuse was because he gradually fell in love with Annie. It was her help that cured his younger sister's illness. Whether it was out of gratitude or affection, Danny chose to stand by Annie's side and protect her. However, when she learned that Danny had exposed their affair, Annie said it was impossible, but she began to doubt in her heart. She didn't know who to believe. On second thought, after all, her daughter was not Danny's. As a man, Jack had trampled on his dignity, so he must be taking revenge on the two of them. Jack once again proposed to take Annie away with him. Even though he knelt and begged, he was still rejected. Jack became twisted in his heart. If he couldn't have her, then he would destroy her. That night, he asked Annie to meet him, claiming that his daughter was with him. Annie was worried about her daughter's safety. In a panic, she didn't think about checking whether her daughter was at home or not. She ran out and shouted for her daughter. Danny heard the sound and ran out too. Jack had lost his mind at that moment. He started the car and rushed over with the accelerator. In a moment of danger, Huizu shouted danger. Fortunately, Danny reacted in time and pulled Annie aside. Jack left and parked the car aside. He scolded himself for being crazy, and why he couldn't let go of a woman who didn't love him. Heman was furious when he learned that his sister had almost been hit. He immediately ordered Officer Park to arrest Jack. When disaster struck, Jack yelled that he would sue them, but when he saw that he was about to be buried alive, he was completely scared. He begged Han Minister to spare his life out of consideration for growing up together. Seeing Jack in a sorry state made Heman very satisfied. In the end, he did not kill Jack. How could the always arrogant Jack accept this humiliation? Unwilling to accept it, he even ignored his father. He found all the evidence of his father's private dealings with Heman and decided to fight to the death with him. And President Jiang of the mental hospital suddenly disappeared. This made Madame very worried. It turned out that Tom secretly rescued him, but Huizu soon came looking for him. What made her sigh was that President Jiang still had a son who truly treated him well. Tom is a kind boy. Huizu doesn't want to hurt him. As long as President Jiang goes to the police station and surrenders himself, Huizu can let him go. President Jiang chose to surrender himself rather than go to the mental hospital. This is Huizu's final act of mercy. However, under Lucy's threat, the police officer had to give in. He still told her the results of the fingerprint investigation. When she learned Huizu's true identity, Lucy was shocked. She took the evidence and confronted Huizu. Huizu pretended to be calm and denied everything. Lucy didn't waste any words with her, and immediately went to Heeman's place to expose Huizu's identity. She had to find a way to stop Lucy as soon as possible, or her years of revenge planning would be in vain. So Huizu took out the fake inheritance document, and deliberately opened it in front of Madame. Madame thought that Huizu's adoptive parents' money had arrived, and was secretly happy when she saw it. Huizu pretended to be unable to accept it after reading it, and in the blink of an eye she fainted. The lady told her son that Huizu suddenly fainted after reading the inheritance letter. Heeman was worried that something was wrong. Just as he was about to go back to confirm, Lucy happened to arrive. Heeman hurried home without bothering to talk to her. After Huizu woke up, she lied that the funds she inherited had been temporarily frozen. It would probably take a few years before she could get them. After hearing this, the lady's blood pressure soared. Heeman found it even more difficult to accept. He blamed everything on Huizu. This completely despaired Heeman. Huizu cried and apologized. In response, she deeply felt remorse. Heeman could not accept this. Emotionally agitated, he teetered on the verge of collapse. The mother and son did not know what to do. They cried in grief, while Huizu looked on quietly. The situation they are in is their own fault, the retribution they deserve. Mother thought the only way out now was to return to Lucy and ask President Hyun for help, but Heeman still rejected this proposal. He considered that Huizu was also deeply shocked and felt remorse. If something happens to him and he doesn't think about it, I don't know how I can go on living. His wife is very disappointed that her son has given up everything for a woman. In the face of this great predicament, Heeman comforts Huizu, telling him not to be sad and that he will do his best to find a solution. With no other options, Officer Park comes up with an idea. Take Huizu's inheritance papers and go to a private loan company to borrow money at high interest rates. His wife is puzzled. Huizu's money is frozen. How can it be used as collateral to borrow money? Officer Park explained that as long as the matter was kept secret, everything would be fine. The information had been verified abroad, so as long as it was not discovered domestically, everything would be fine. Although the risk was great, as a means of immediate liquidity, the wife decided to take the risk and give it a try. Huizu deliberately reminded her that the inheritance certificate was no longer legally valid, but the wife blamed Huizu for the current predicament. The wife kept persuading her, and she insisted on taking it. And this was Huizu's ultimate trap. In the blink of an eye, the wife arrived at the company. Under her persuasion, Heeman agreed to borrow from a third party at high interest. This decision of Madame's will push her son into an endless abyss. But Huizu's situation is also becoming more and more unimaginable. Lucy didn't get the chance to tell Heeman her true identity, so she decided to go to Jack first. Huizu rushed over to stop her and told her the truth about what happened 7 years ago. But Lucy thought she was slandering Heeman. She insisted on telling everyone Huizu's identity. When Jack learned about this, he was shocked. He couldn't believe this truth, but kept saying in his mouth that Huizu came to take revenge. Lucy was puzzled after hearing this. She didn't know about Jack and Heeman's affair, and Jack asked her to go back first. This matter involves human lives. Huizu kept waiting outside, seeing Jack send Lucy away. She then came to Jack's house. Huizu no longer hid her identity. She warned Jack that if he revealed her identity, he would make public those crimes. Jack agreed but put forward conditions. One was to hand over evidence of his crimes, the second is to let Annie return to him, and the third is to remove himself from the revenge list. Huizu agreed to his conditions in order to get through the current difficulties. Paul also told President Hyun about Huizu's ordeal. Learning about what Heeman and Jack had done, President Hyun was very grateful that she could not let her daughter jump into the fire, and also decided not to help Heeman for her daughter. However, Heeman, under his mother's repeated urging, had already used Huizu's property inheritance certificate to borrow money from loan sharks. Huizu let the creditors know that the funds in the inheritance letter had been frozen, and soon the creditors came looking for Heeman to take him away. In this situation, he would not allow these people to harm Huizu. As expected, Heeman was carried back covered in bruises. At present, the only way to ensure Heeman's safety is to repay the money. At a loss, Mrs. Heeman thought of Jack, so she wanted her daughter to borrow money from Jack. But Jack tried to run her over a few days ago. Annie said she would never go. There was nothing she could do, so the wife had to go herself. Jack agreed without hesitation, selling his possessions, but Annie had to agree to a condition in exchange. Their conversation was bugged by Huizu. She couldn't let Heeman have any breathing room, so she arranged a meeting with Jack to warn him that if he helped Heeman, she would make his crimes public. If Heeman didn't die, she would. Jack had no choice but to agree to Huizu's demands. Seeing Jack's phone, The wife was very excited. She thought the other party had prepared the money, and Jack felt very apologetic. Now even if Annie is willing to leave with him, he cannot fulfill his previous promise. President Hyun seized the opportunity to acquire Heeman's company. She directly revoked President Heeman's position. Now Heeman has nothing, but he is grateful to have Huezu's company. And Huezu, in order to provoke a rift between Danny and Annie, asked her aunt to bring her son out tomorrow. Danny finally met her biological son. Although he called him uncle, Danny was already content. He was very grateful to Huezu for letting him see his child. This scene was witnessed by Annie. It seemed that she had already determined Huezu's identity. After confirming this matter from Jack's mouth, Annie could not help but feel afraid. Lucy was very conflicted at this moment. She didn't know whether to tell Heeman Huezu's identity. What if Heeman suffered retaliation? After much hesitation, Lucy told Heeman about it. Faced with the facts, Heeman still didn't want to believe it. Lucy told him to wake up. Huezu confessed in person and even told him about what happened at the villa 7 years ago. On the way home, Heeman looked like he had nothing to live for. He wished so much that none of this was real. When he got home, he stormed in and confronted Huezu. He asked Huezu if she had come for revenge. Why hadn't she killed him when she had so many chances? And why was she pregnant with their child? Huezu just wanted him to suffer, destroying the company and dragging his family into the abyss. This is more painful than killing him. Heeman closed in on Huezu. He thought he was going to do something terrible to Huezu, but he fell deeply in love with this woman. Even if he was pierced by 1,000 arrows, he never wanted to hurt Huezu. Heeman was devastated and could not bear it. He wandered by the river thinking about what happened 7 years ago and regretted it. At this moment Heeman was overcome with grief. He took off Huezu's wedding ring and threw it into the river with reluctance. If he could have thrown away his love for Huezu, why did he make himself so sad? Huezu did not choose to leave. She was already prepared to die together. However, Jack told Madame Huezu's identity. Madame instantly turned pale with fear. Thinking about everything that had happened in the family recently, she could not help but feel extremely frightened. The next day, Heeman came to the company and wanted to use 15% of his shares to exchange for a branch company. President Hyun then asked Paul for his opinion. Paul immediately refused, because the group was founded by his father. President Jung framed his father in order to take over. After Paul took over, everything was investigated. At this moment, Heeman was at his wit's end. When she learned that President Hyun had refused to buy the shares, the wife panicked completely. They will soon be living on the streets. Heeman went back to his room and knelt before Huezu, begging her to forgive the mistakes he had made. Heeman confessed to his past, and Huezu was not unloving. She just didn't dare admit that she was in love with her enemy. The anger in her heart still made her hard-hearted. Heeman understood that everything was planned by Huezu, and Danny had long known her true identity. He believed that the two were conspiring together to come for revenge. Being deceived by the man she loved deeply hurt Annie. She was tired of her current life and had lost hope for the future. Fortunately, Danny found her in time, and after rescue, Annie survived. It was only at this moment that she truly appreciated Danny's true heart. Danny also promised to guard by her side and never leave her. Later, Danny found Huezu and asked her how far she was willing to go with her revenge. She asked if she would never forgive herself for abandoning her. Huezu no longer resented what had happened to Danny and Annie. This was the best punishment. The lady came to question Huezu. Do you really want to push Heeman to the brink? He is the father of your 2 children. Huezu warned her not to be delusional. How could she possibly have a child with her enemy? The lady thought she wanted to abort the baby. She persuaded her to calm down. Huezu threw her off and demanded that they pay back everything that she and her parents had suffered. The lady hurriedly chased after her, fell to her knees and begged her to spare Heeman. Huezu told her to stop shedding cheap tears. She knew that it was impossible to expect the lady to sincerely repent. After saying this, she turned and left. Huezu then met with a trusted prosecutor and handed over all the evidence against them. This prosecutor had been a close friend of Paul's father. He also felt deep sympathy for what Huezu had gone through. He decided to prosecute Jack and Heeman for murder. Officer Park went to Jack's house first to protect himself. He wanted to find out what incriminating evidence Jack had against him, but Jack attacked him from behind without any honor. Officer Park was stabbed and died at Jack's hands. Heeman hid at Lucy's house to avoid arrest by the police. President Hyun gave him a severe slap in the face and angrily scolded Heeman for having the face to come here. He forbade his daughter to have anything more to do with a wanted criminal. Lucy gave Heeman her credit cards and cash as a last memento of her affection for him. Heeman never believed that Huezu had no feelings for him, and in order to seek an answer, he secretly returned home despite the police's wanted notice, which worried his mother. She had already started selling her jewelry to get the money to flee abroad with Heeman, but Heeman insisted on seeing Huezu and the child before leaving. He went to the room and saw Huezu packing her bags and asked. Huezu asked him not to ask too many questions. After all, the two had already ended. Heeman was unwilling to accept this reality. Since their marriage, The two had never shared a room. The child Heman had been hoping for was nothing more than an abdominal belt his wife had taken off. Huezu's words stung his heart. Heman questioned her. Why are you so cruel? Doesn't it hurt? He could accept that Huezu didn't love him, and could also understand Huezu's revenge on him, but he could not accept that she deceived him with a child. Huezu just silently shed tears without struggling, even when Heman used all his strength to strangle her. Huezu did not resist, so Heman let go. Since marrying her, Heman has changed a lot. He just wants to be a good husband and make Huezu happy. He prays that Huezu will forget her hatred and stop the tragedy from unfolding. He hopes that she can live a good life, and just regard it as an unchangeable nightmare. Huezu looks at him coldly. Heman no longer has any expectations. He turns around and leaves in disappointment. He was in pain, but no matter how much he blamed himself, he could not go back to that night 8 years ago. Huezu was also heartbroken. Heman's devotion was clear to her and had touched her deeply, but the hatred in her heart had always prevented her from letting go. Heman went to the place where the tragedy began. Scenes from 8 years ago flashed through his mind. He didn't know how to ask Huezu for forgiveness, and he didn't know how to make up for the sins he had committed when he was young and reckless. Meanwhile, Huezu arrived here with his wife, Jack, who followed them. Didn't know that he was deliberately luring him here. Huezu then notified the prosecutor to come to this villa to arrest Heman and Jack. Unexpectedly, as soon as he hung up the phone, Jack appeared. Huezu mocked Heman, who had a bright future, for falling into such a state. His father is in prison, his lover has left him, and he himself will go to prison. Jack said that it was thanks to her that he had come to this point. Jack was furious and would not let Huezu go. After all, Huezu is dead. This time, she will definitely disappear completely. Jack gradually closed in on Huezu. In desperation, Huezu picked up her bag and hit Jack on the head. Jack kept up the chase and caught her in the hallway. Upstairs, Heman was talking to his mother on the phone. Suddenly, he heard Huezu scream. He hurried over and saw the scene in front of him. Heman rushed over to stop them. As the two were struggling with each other, Heman accidentally pushed Jack down the hallway. At this moment, Jack seemed to see Huezu's father, who was punished in the same way. Until the last moment, Jack was thinking about Annie, who never got her heart in her life. This will eventually become his regret. The two were like brothers. Although they fought and quarreled, they never really resented each other. I wonder how Huezu feels at this moment. After sending Jack off, Heman slowly walked up to Huezu. He didn't say a word, but left a letter. Then he walked upstairs alone. The letter was full of remorse for Huezu. It all started 8 years ago at the villa that night. At that time, Heman and Jack were both immature children. Heman lost his mind after drinking and saw the beautiful Huezu and had evil thoughts. Jack also harmed Huezu's father. Heman hoped that it was just a nightmare, but nothing can be changed. In the end, although Huezu forgave Heman, Heman could not forgive himself, as he watched his enemies fall one after the other. Did Huezu feel pain in her heart? The lady could not accept this blow. She will have to live with endless torment for the rest of her life. A revenge comedy full of criticism of human nature. If everyone is kind and feels guilty for their past misdeeds, would Huezu have gone so far as to do such a terrible thing? Good and evil will eventually be rewarded or punished. But when will the cycle of revenge end? On the road to revenge, she has unknowingly lost herself. In order to fight against the devil, she has actually become the devil herself. Thank you all for your support and company.